Welcome to the broadcast of Are You Due for a Time and Attendance Tune-Up. I'm joined here today. My name is Tom Trombley. I'm joined today with Virginia Ware from Workforce Software. I have been working for the last number of years with many companies, small, medium, large enterprise, and have gotten a lot of looks at the things that go on in HR and payroll organizations, the things that go well, the things that can cause things to be disruptive. And so, as vague and generic as that is, we're going to start digging into those today and solving some of those. But first, Virginia, if you would like to say a little bit about yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Virginia Ware. I am a senior solution consultant with Workforce Software. I've been in this human capital management space a little over 5 years and looking forward to sharing some of our solution with you today.
Thanks, Virginia. So if you are with us today, thank you for joining. And I wanted to start by saying you can ask questions today if you want to voice an opinion about something or ask a question. There's a Q&A box. If you type your question in there, then we will address that, bring it up. So feel free to interact. We definitely value your engagement. If you're watching this after the fact, there'll be some connection information and a web page and address at the end where you can reach out to us if you'd like to continue the conversation. And you know, when you get going into a webinar, we've got the next hour in front of us. You know, you want to know, is this for me? Kind of right up, right? So I just want to let you know who this is targeted at, the type of information that we're going to be covering. And so we're generally looking to address things that will be relevant to those who are decision makers in a business where you're a vice president, director of HR, payroll, for example, where you are tasked with making your organization more lean, more efficient, right? Eliminate the waste, and you know, the other relevant attendees may be if you are in HR payroll as a manager or some other position, and depending on the size of your organization, you might be a director even, where somebody has tasked you with taking a look at how to better processes. Alternatively, if you're just an employee who's interested and you care about your organization, maybe you've been dealing with some things within your organization that are causing you pain, and you're looking to start the process, try to be the thorn in the side that says, hey, let's improve things. And so if you're that employee looking for a better way, then welcome, and you're every bit a part of this as well.
I'm just in the background. Okay,
so what we have on the agenda for today is we're going to look at the benefits of a time and attendance tune-up.
Yeah, because I'm just listening.
So got a little bit of feedback. So once we have identified, you know, we're going to take a look at the organization and some examples of things that you can look at, things that are causing some pain in your organization. You know, indicators that you might be actually needing to improve your processes as well. And after we do that, we get a good feel for when to do a tune-up. We're going to look at how to identify the areas in your organization, things to think about when you're saying, are these good opportunities of areas that do need to be tuned up? And then we'll give some examples with some of those areas that we talked about to say, here are some real-world examples of ways that you could address and solve these. And that will be through the lens of a workforce time and attendance, and also their absence compliance tracker product for today. But it could be applicable with any product that does this as well. And then all of this is good, but it's only of value to your organization if you actually take action based on that. And so we will look at a practical common sense plan for, you know, just highlights of getting your organization moved to action around what you've identified. So let's just jump right into it then with the benefits of a time and attendance tune-up. One of the things that we expect if we're going to do our effort is that that ultimately the HR and payroll departments, the time and attendance, those aren't things that directly profit the business, but they are necessary, and especially as an organization begins to grow and the complexities grow, then it is imperative to have good time and attendance systems in place, to have good HR and payroll processes in place. So ultimately, what we do as HR and payroll is we support the customer-facing employees, the employees who are helping to drive profits into the business, and we want to make their minds decluttered. We want to improve their available resources, whatever it is that we can do to make sure that they are able to serve the customers that ultimately keep the business healthy and alive. But additionally, we want the employees to be satisfied as well. We want employees who don't feel like there's a lot of barriers to them doing their day job and constantly getting sidetracked with chasing down payroll issues, right? An employee who's not getting paid correctly is not a satisfied employee. They're not going to be able to perform as well as one who doesn't have those distractions. If you have employees who are needing leaves, right? They have a medical leave, and their benefit plans or their pay or just their tracking of available leave is being compromised by processes, then that's going to impact their satisfaction. And so not only can we have distractions based on employees who are experiencing problems in this area, but their morale may drop as well. So we want a tune-up to improve the employee satisfaction as it relates to their interaction with HR and payroll sides of the business. And then another thing that's very important, and depending on where you are in your journey, you may already have some good data, but the more on the paper side, the archaic side of things that you are, you're going to find that the data that you have to make decisions with gets better and better the more up to date you are, and the better processes that you have in place, the more of those pain points that are resolved. One of the things that we want to see is that not only are your customers being taken care of better and your employees happier, but at the executive level, they've got better data to make their decisions, or even in your departments, right? You have better data to make decisions, leave qualifications, or things like that. So we want to improve those processes as well. And then one of the things that I mentioned earlier, right, about running a lean organization without waste, right, is, the early easy thing to think when you hear lean is that, oh, we're looking to chop heads. Actually, not so much, right? We're looking to make you more efficient. And so, definitely from where I sit, I've heard it many times that employees look at these types of initiatives to tune up an organization as, what the organization is going to have to decrease by X number of headcount because of these, the efficiencies of these changes that we're going to make. And so, while that would go towards the employee satisfaction, there may be some change management needed, where you have conversations with the employees about how their role may flex and change a little bit due to the efficiencies. Ultimately, you want to have an organization that isn't wasting a lot of money. When 2008 came around and during the dot-com bust, right, the organizations that were not wasting money were the organizations that were most likely to succeed, and we saw that. That plays out in the data of analyzing those times. The businesses who were lean, the businesses that weren't wasting a lot of resources on processes that were old, or just because somebody else already did this, or they have a software that wasn't kept up to date, those were the ones that stood a better chance, and more of those survived than their counterparts who didn't have very good processes in place. So yeah, want to be able to survive the downturns. It could be economic downturns. It could be just that the market is changing, right? Think about the phones that we used to talk on when, now we've got a smartphone wave that's taken over the world. That it might be a time like that causes it to be tight as well. And ultimately, when it comes down to the business side of things, running a leaner, better business should improve profits. As mentioned before, this one, depending on what level you're at, this one can, maybe somebody says that, well, profits, business got to make their profits, right? So this is definitely with a thought to still taking care of the employees. It's not that you would hit any one of these only. Ideally, you should be able to span all of these, right? Your improved profits make it better to survive during the tight times while still providing better service to your customers and better employee satisfaction, still having the better data. So this is what we're looking at today. And when we start looking at what is it that needs a tune-up, there are some general things that these general properties that we can look at to say, if I'm hearing or feeling or experiencing this type of thing in my daily life, or if I'm hearing of others that are experiencing these types of things, then it may be that we are primed for a tune-up, right? It's the purpose of pain. Pain isn't bad. The purpose of pain is to let us know that something is wrong. And so these pain points are good in that they're pointing out to you areas in the business that are opportunities to do better in. And so looking at the pain point characteristics, cumbersome leading that off, right? If when you or one of your employees or somebody else in the business, they're experiencing something related with HR and payroll, and specifically time and attendance, and they're saying, you know what, the act of approving timesheets, of going through employee timesheets and checking to make sure that everything's correct, or the act of fixing mistakes. We have a rework line down there, right? Timesheets were wrong, and now we've caught it, but we have to go back and we have to fix a bunch of mistakes. You start to feel real pain there, right? It may be that that those processes expose you to risk, right? Doing manual processes means that you're not paying employees correctly. Things are getting missed. Maybe you have an enforced meal break that carries a penalty with it. If the employee is not supposed to take a lunch that's shorter than an hour, for example, and there's a penalty that the business owes them legislatively. They said, you've got to pay this employee more because they had a short lunch. There's a risk involved with not getting that correct, or messing up on the FMLA leave, the Family Medical Leave Act in the United States, right? To say you are guaranteed your job for a certain number of weeks, and you want to know that you're administering that correctly. That's a law. Also, you may find that that you have a gap somewhere. Something's missing, right? I really wish we knew this, right? How much vacation time do I have left? Well, you shouldn't have to dive into an Excel spreadsheet and count the number of days to tell somebody how much vacation time they have left. You might have something missing, some type of automation to say, you know what, let me just pull up my dashboard. You've got 12 days left. And it may be that the costs are just out of whack, right? You've got a lot of expense in your department. There's a reason that there is a pinch being felt at the executive levels when they're looking at the cost of the department. Hey, we're expecting that payroll in HR departments should cost about this much to run, and those costs are up. Or maybe it's the costs of overtime in the field because the data is not there to provide meaningful input on schedules. And so these are the types of things that you would want to look at when you are when you're saying, okay, I'm on this journey. I'm feeling the pain in the business. These are the types of things that are going to be calling out to you to say there is a problem that needs to be addressed. So some of the symptoms of those, if you're noticing a lot of errors, right? So just flipping back for a moment, these are what you might feel and kind of the intangibles that are just around you. To put it into a little bit more of a tangible world is that, if you have specific errors being noticed, you have missing punches, or you have an employee who seems to never take vacation, but you know that they've got days off, right? There's errors. You've got delays. It may be that you're not getting at a payroll level, you're not getting the notification from your managers that they have approved the time of the people. They've looked at the timesheets and they're late in telling you all the time that yes, their timesheets are okay. It may be just flat out complaints within your department at the executive level. It may be employees that you're hearing complaints from, right? I didn't get paid. One of the surefire signs of something's wrong is if you have legal action brought against you. That's a really good time to take a look and say, yes, we need to evaluate our processes. And the other side of that is terminations. Now, this might be an employee who voluntarily quits. They're just, they can't handle getting paid like this all the time, where they constantly have to go back for corrections, or things are bad enough on their end that their morale has dropped, and they start looking around, and maybe they weren't furious when they left, but maybe they just had enough of a ugh about this that they went and started shopping. But it could also be customer terminations, right? The customer is saying, hey, we don't want to work with you anymore. And that one is a little more indirect, but the cost of employees leaving can oftentimes have a cost on customers, especially if you're in a service-based industry and their favorite consultant left, for example. So these are some, if you start to see things like this is not a comprehensive list, but if you start to see things like this, where there's a pain point and I can point, I've got a general feeling for, something's wrong, and I can point to specifically, actually, yeah, here's how I'm finding out about it, then it's time to do that tune-up. And so what I'd like to do is let's look into a list of some examples, some real-world things that may be happening, and some of the consequences of that. And then after we've gone through this, then we will look at through the lens of one software, the workforce software time and attendance, and the ACT module as well, that ways that we can fix this or make this to where we no longer have a pain point, but we're running efficiently and not wasting. So when it comes to absences, there's a variety of things that this could mean. So I'm just going to give you some examples of absence pain points that you may experience. You may have people who take vacations, as I mentioned before, that are unreported. I worked with a customer, and this customer had a practice of, the employees were supposed to report their absences. If they were an employee that punched in and punched out, that was pretty easy to detect because they didn't punch in on a given day. But their salaried individuals had no requirement to punch in or punch out on the timesheet, and so therefore, when they went to take vacations, what actually happened in practice, even though they were supposed to go through a process of letting people know, fill out the piece of paper, get it submitted to HR and get your bank deducted, your vacation bank. Well, what was happening in practice is that these salaried folks would just work it out with their team and let them know, hey, I'll be gone on this day through that day, and the team was okay with that, but it never got reported to payroll. And when we came in and started evaluating the data behind, what are your vacation balances, we had people who had been there for a number of years that had over 5 years of vacation time that had been built up that was in an account that was a liability. So when that employee terminated, they were responsible to either pay that out over 5 years if they just took like a termination vacation, or they were responsible to pay out 5 years worth of pay on the day that the employee quit. And so as you can tell, that's quite a risk to a business, and it represents a lot of money that you have sitting around and tied up. And ultimately, it's a loss because that's already been paid to the employee. They continued to get their check even though they were on vacation. And so, things like that can have quite a negative impact on a business and on the books, and ultimately the profitability of the business. Buddy punching is a very big one, right? Where you've got a couple of friends who work in the same department, and they just have to key in the buddy's number on the clock, and their buddy's running 15 minutes late. He calls up his friend. He says, hey, I'm running 15 minutes late. Just punch me in so I don't get in trouble. And lo and behold, 15-minute late buddy is suddenly on time as far as the system is concerned. And so that obviously is time theft. And, unreported vacations amount to time theft as well, maybe inadvertent, but buddy punching is a more clear example of where you're paying for time that the employee is not even there. Excessive tardiness, right? The effects of excessive tardiness on a business, they can be a bit insidious up front, a little difficult to detect, but when you start looking at what happens when employees are routinely late, right, that can affect the morale of the rest of the team or the efficiency of the rest of the team, right? An example is we've done work in organizations where they've got production lines, and it relies on every member of the team being present before they are allowed to spin up the line. There's safety reasons behind that. There's physically takes this many people to run the line. And so somebody who's excessively tardy, what's happening is that business is less efficient because they are not able to get their line up and running and producing whatever it is that they're producing. So, so that can be an area as well that's costing the business money. Compliance errors. So there are a host of things that can happen in compliance. I'm going to focus on a couple. Leave compliance is one, right? We talked a moment ago about somebody who's on a family medical leave and their job is guaranteed for a certain number of weeks. You don't want to be slapped with a lawsuit for violating their right to have that leave and to preserve their job. You may end up with an extra employee on your payroll because this employee was guaranteed the right to get their job back. So there's actually a depending on the leave and the regulations around that, compliance can leave you open to a wide variety of costs. Legal costs, not the least, right? It may be that a legal proceeding is initiated and you find yourself spending a lot of money on attorneys and such. And so, yeah, right into legal compliance, right? So you want to make sure the employees are getting what they need. You want to make sure that you're complying with the law. And so where you notice that you're getting slapped with lawsuits or you got employees complaining that their leaves are going wrong, then these are areas that do need to be addressed. Union rules is an area that, this is one that unions have a notoriety in the industry of causing complexity. So it's very easy to talk things into a bargaining agreement. And it's even relatively straightforward if you're looking at it in one employee and applying the union rules, and then you can actually make a pencil and paper do anything. But when you have hundreds of employees in a union and complex union rules and things are not being followed, or somebody's doing the calculation wrong, you can leave yourself at risk for having a grievance filed, which will go along with the same types of risks of having something legal thrown at you, right? It's maybe not in the courts, but initially it's, you're working with the union reps and you're wasting time getting this stuff resolved. And in the meantime, you've got your employee who's using business time handling union grievances and defending themselves, and so things can get costly in a hurry. Not to mention the time on payroll, right? So the folks who have to do this research, payroll, HR, right? Well, the employee files a grievance or a case goes to court, and it's very easy to say, it's just the time of the employee, but actually, you're going to be spending a lot of time digging up reports and doing research, and hopefully the data is even there to be able to defend yourself, right? With an outdated system, you may not have the data in place, or the data may not be veritable enough, may not have the integrity behind it to where you can use it in court to say this stands up and that's good data. And so losing these lawsuits is of course more costly even than winning them. So good data is something that we're looking for in there as well. In payroll operations, there's things that happen in payroll that on a piece of paper, again, it's pretty easy to say an employee gets this, this particular rule for working this many hours in a day, and but if they work over this number of hours or in a day, or they work over this number of hours in a week, or if depending on the unions or the complexity of the work, or is it emergency level work, right? We've done work for companies where in a utility situation, for example, where storms blow through and employees go from normal operations, just to having a normal work 40 hours in a week, and if you go over 40, then you get overtime, to all of a sudden they're getting maybe 2 to 3 hours of sleep because your power needs to get back on. And they're doing that for 2 to 3 weeks. And the rules involved in doing things like that, right? To say, okay, what do we pay when the employee gets this much sleep versus when they get this much sleep? What do we pay when they get this many hours of work in a week, but if it goes to 2 weeks, then it's this many hours of work. And these are rolling periods to where, the complications of these calculations can get very crazy and very out of hand. And Not only do employees get paid incorrectly frequently in these types of situations where these are not automated, but it spends, the physical spend in time to get these things figured out and make sure that they get paid straight can be enormous. And the less automation you have along these lines, the more cost it takes to get people paid. This is incremental to the pay of the people themselves, right? The cost of having someone sit at a desk and figure out these calculations. And maybe you're using a spreadsheet, or maybe you're using paper, or whatever it is that you're using, right? The more automated it is, the more current it is, the better that process can get for you. Bad data is a massive problem, right? We talked about the vacations, that was amounted to a bad data problem, right? They didn't have the data that an employee was going on vacation, and so it was costing them, thousands of dollars because they had employees who had been taking vacations that on the books had 5 years to take, and they couldn't prove that they didn't. So there's costs in bad data. There's research costs in bad data. You've got to go find out, if you don't get that punch in, and I'm trying to run payroll, how do you remember what happened 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago? That data may not be accurate, and I can't even pay you until I find out you punched in at a given time, but I don't know when you punched out. Do I make an assumption? Do I go back and correct it later and just not pay you for that day? There can be an impact on employee morale at that point if they're not getting paid for that day, and all that it needed was something on the front end to say, hey, make sure you get that out punch in as well. Also, when you're decision making based on data and you don't have all the data that you need, you can cost yourself again in terms of risk and opening up compliance issues and such. And then when things happen and you need to go back and you need to make changes, or maybe it's not even going back, maybe you need to make changes to this period, right? How much time is it taking you to get a change in? So if, for example, you had something happen at the plant where everybody's working, or the building where you've got, power goes out in a building where you've got 400 people working, and so they all get to go home at 2:30, but you want to pay them through the rest of the day. And so, do you go through and manually enter on a piece of paper, or manually enter into a system that, from 2:30 to 5, we had this period of time that this employee still needs to get paid for, and you got to do that 400 times because there's no automation there, right? So even if you have an automated system, but your change process is not automated, then you can still be costing yourself time. Additionally, there's oftentimes research that needs to happen. So an example of this would be, the employees are going to be, we've worked with organizations where the employees get their pay adjusted every year for inflation, but they will also get a bonus. But before that can be applied to the employees, there is a period of time that at the corporate level they're evaluating and also working with payroll and accounting to figure out how much should this raise be. And so the raise will be effective from January 1st on a given year, but the employee won't actually find out what that raise is, and in fact the business won't make the determination of what that raise is until sometime in March or April. So what happens then is that you've got a couple months of pay that has all been at the old rate, and now you've got to go back and update all of the pay that the employee received against the new rate. And so that can take a lot of time if you don't have automated processes or better processes. This is a place where you can cost yourself a lot of time in going back and making changes. And then there's the errors themselves, right? So payroll errors, we talked about a little bit, right? They cost research. So maybe it wasn't an error that the employee got a rate change, but you find out about it in April and it's got to be applied retroactively, but on the other hand, it may be that they were given a pay raise, in the same line of thought, right? Maybe they were given a pay raise and somebody didn't enter it. So they've been being paid incorrectly for several periods. And now somebody's got to go back and research. Well, that's time cost involved, and that's morale cost to the employee. So this can all have an effect on your business and your profitability. And then the actual act of making corrections, right? So one of the things that is easy to see is that the act of making a correction costs time. One of the things that's maybe a little more hidden is if you're going to make the correction, where are you going to make that? Are you going to put that in today's check, which means that you're putting it in a point in time on today's timesheet? the correction. Well, that's okay to do, but what happens then is that you are missing that data at the point in time that it actually should have occurred. So to say that your costs, if in the example that we had done where the whole group of employees found out about their raise in April, if we gave them just a settle up in April, they would not be able to see that data. The executives, whoever's running reports against the data for January through March, in that time frame, you're not going to see the effects of the higher rate of pay on the business. And that can oftentimes be very important, right? And it may not just be pay, right? It might be costing. It might be, departments that are getting billed. It may have an actual impact on if you're billing out a customer for labor data, and so in your time capture system, you're not getting the correct labor distribution or the costing of whatever work is being done in a timely manner, and if you can't go back and make those corrections to where they are at that point in time, then you're going to have difficulty understanding what happened to your projects over that period of time. And also, when these things happen, for whatever reason, whether it's an employee bringing something or one of your vendors that you're needing to provide data for, the cost of an audit can be huge as well. And can you even do an audit with your data? So those audits, the audits can happen, and when they happen, the cost to support an audit with outdated systems, with poor record keeping, or just older styles of record keeping, those can drive your costs of compliance way up. But again, as we pointed out before, the fact that there is an audit, do you have the data to defend yourself? And even an additional consideration than that is what is triggering the audit. A lot of times, if you don't have the errors, you may never get an audit. Not to say you'll never be audited, but your rate of audit, you shouldn't get audits because some employee complained about the way that they were getting paid. Those should be greatly reduced. And then in scheduling, so we've alluded to this a little bit, right? If we're looking at the cost of a schedule, right? We may be having a lot of overtime. Why do we have so many employees working overtime? Do you have a way of determining, what it is that's causing overtime? Why aren't we hiring more employees? Why, do we have employees who are working efficiently, right? And so, so whether you have a good scheduling system or not, and these are sometimes managed at the lower levels. Sometimes they're managed up in HR. It really depends on the organization. But a good scheduling piece of software can help you to overcome some of the barriers that you get without having a good line of sight to being able to compare your schedule to something else. So if you are in a place where you're seeing a lot of overtime, or you're seeing that you are understaffed, or that you're running over budget a lot, then those pain points may be indicative of a problem in your scheduling. And then finally, for today, this is, like I said, it's not an all-inclusive list, but for today, the last thing that I want to cover is in the information technology department. Now, if you're in payroll and HR, it is actually critical that you have a good relationship with IT, especially if you want to gain a lot of efficiencies, right? They are the people who are the gatekeepers to you being able to run whatever systems you need to run. And some of the things with IT, though, is that if IT is not aware of your needs, or they don't understand the pain that is happening in your department or in your organization, then they may not be able to provide good, meaningful input to you in how to solve these things. But some things that can cause pain is just the software that you have is outdated. It may be surprising to you, but we routinely see companies that run on green screen software. And if you're watching this and you're saying, what is green screen software? That's back when the color monitor meant that you had green or yellow. Those were your two choices, amber or green, right? And so we see green screen software that is being used to run massive organizations still, because it's what they have and the people know how to run it. But what's happening is that in the industry, the people who implemented those things, those systems, and have used them for years, they're starting to get to retirement age. And on top of that, the system is no longer functional for their current business needs, and it's a great possibility that the support costs a lot of extra money, right? So lack of functionality would cause additional work to do things manually. The support challenges would be that you're either having to maintain internal support, or the people who do know these pieces of software, they get really expensive because the up-and-comers into the business world, they're not spending their time learning green screen systems. They're learning current software. And so support gets more and more expensive. And you may have programming support that's needed as well, right? Well, it doesn't do what we need it to do, so we're going to hire this crack programmer who's willing to learn COBOL or some outdated programming language. And they're going to come in there and they're going to maintain it for you, but they're a cost, right? And then maybe they can add some functionality. But one of the other things that is very relevant in today's world is that these systems are probably no longer getting regular maintenance and updates from their vendors, the people who created them to begin with. So the risks to using one of these from a security perspective goes way up. And so the security would be, could be, the risk to hackers, and what happens if all of your personally identifiable information is getting out, or what happens, it's not necessarily just a hacker where you can have security issues. It could be data security, right? Do they make the tape drives that you need still to back up your data on a regular basis? Do the newer systems and the other things that you need to put in place, do they interface with this older system? Are you being held back because you've got an outdated system in one area of your business? So it's important to keep IT in mind when looking at those types of things. So so as we go into solving what we've just talked about and taking a look at some of those things, there's several things that we want to consider as earmarks of something that might be worth pursuing, right? When we look at solving any one of these given problems, we want to look at, does this save us time in some way? Will there be less effort involved, less hours spent, right? That's going to have a direct impact on the bottom line, right? Saving time saves money, but also not paying people too much to begin with saves money. A lot of companies have a policy of, once we pay the employee, that's theirs. We're not going to try to get it back from them. And so if you are not overpaying employees, you're paying them correctly to your rules, you're going to save money there. And obviously saving money can have a lot of impacts as we go through. Mitigating risk, whatever you're looking at putting in place, should not increase the risk for sure, but maybe there's an area, you're noticing a bunch of litigation in a particular area, overtime payments or something like that, and employees feel like they're getting underpaid. Well, it costs money and it costs time to have that as a risk. So if we can reduce the risk, we can then reduce the time and the money, say, for having to handle those. Making informed decisions is really a big one, right? These systems, when you start to look at solutions for handling your pain points, if you are doing that in a way that doesn't improve the data that's available throughout the organization, then that's a big missing opportunity. So I would look at, make sure that whatever you're doing to solve your problems, solve your pain points, is going to improve the data available to make decisions. And that can take a variety of looks, right? It could be reports. It could be sending data to a data warehouse for analysis. It could be that something pops up as an alert, right? When a certain set of conditions happens. And we'll look at some of those things. And then finally, standardization, right? So there have been organizations that we've worked with, and so if this is you, you're not alone. You're in good hands, or you're in good company. But just know that this is a way, or a thing that you should be looking at when you're looking to solve your pain points. That if you have a business that has, for group one over here, they've got a certain set of processes or pay rules or HR processes, and a very similar group B over here, still within your organization, has a completely unique set of rules. And we find this a lot of times where there's multiple unions involved, for example. But to the point that you can get standardization across your organization, look, when it comes to overtime, let's just have one set of rules. When it comes to vacation policies, let's have one set of rules. And it might be one set of rules with 5 levels within it, right? If you meet this criteria, then you get level 1, and if you meet this criteria, you get level 2. And so you can you can apply diversity in a standardized way. But if I look at exact problem number one, and I find exact problem number one over here and exact problem number one over there, I should be able to solve it with the same logic. And so while recognizing that this is not always possible, to the extent that, that you can standardize in terms of business practices and business rules and with software and just a standard approach across your organization, then these are ways to help you save time, save money, eliminate waste, right? Become a leaner, more efficient machine. So looking first at IT side of things, I know it's the last one we talked about, but there's a couple of things that you can think about, right? So this is not necessarily, like I said, the easiest one for someone who's in HR payroll to think IT, but to the extent that you can, work with your IT department to look at, okay, what is available in terms of current offerings from companies with reputations, you know, for making sure that their software stays up to date and that they're maintaining their software. The green screen systems are no longer being maintained, right? Unless you're doing it yourself or you're paying top dollar for somebody who took the time to stay current in those. Or stay current, right? They actually had to go backwards and update an old currency. So make sure that whoever you're working with has something that is being maintained and that they are providing for good functionality updates. So as the market changes and as the laws change, are those things being updated or pushed out to you? And we'll take a look for a moment at the absence compliance tracker in a minute, and you'll see from that perspective, the software, whenever the laws change on certain leave rules, you know, the US passes a new leave law or Canada passes a new leave law at a certain level, and those will become updated automatically. You don't have to worry about staying compliant. Those will be updated and you will stay current with your ability to maintain compliance. And so that makes it a lot easier on IT if the vendor, the person who you're getting, the people you're getting your software from, are doing that maintenance. Also, as we talked about, it is, you know, it is good to align yourself to best practices and to standards. Those may be you making determinations within your business, but it may also be looking out at the vendor and saying, hey, you know, do you already have a pre-existing solution for how to do this? When it comes, I mean, a very simple, commonly known rule is in the United States, you have the Fair Labor Standards Act. And if you work over 40 hours, you've got to give that employee overtime. Well, there are multiple different ways that you could calculate to or make your system look or figure out how to do that. But when it comes to workforce software and their time and attendance product, they've got preset rules for how to do that. They've got a preset way of doing it. And all you have to do is, you know, your employees record their time, the timesheet's up to date, and the system will automatically calculate through. If you can use their method of doing it, that will save you money. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. So if you can, you know, definitely be willing to look at vendors and say, what do you have that already does this? And then look within your own organization as well and say, how can we align to the best practices, A, that we come up with internally, but B, also that are in the industry or from a vendor or from their standards organizations also. So the other thing, and this is along the line of updates, but you know, are you going to host this software on a server that you've got maintained locally and your IT has to control it? Or are you going to use what's called software as a service? And if you're not familiar with this, this is where the vendor, such as Workforce Software, does this. They have the software in the cloud, and it's a secure cloud with many layers of security built in, and it complies with the current standards for security. And so where the vendor is willing to take that on, you don't have to rely on your IT department then to do all that work. That's another place where you could be losing efficiency and having waste, and that, you know, let's just switch over to the cloud and then we don't have to maintain that at all. And the load on your IT becomes that much easier. And also, because they're doing the updates, as it says here, you know, you reduce the risk of becoming stuck in outdated software, coming back to the same problem in 10 years just because another 10 years have gone by. So we talked about buddy punching as well. And, you know, one of the ways that you can avoid that is by using clocks. And so here we have pictures of workforce software's clocks, and what you see down on the bottom next to the keypad is you've got an area for the employee to stick their finger. So if your 15 minutes late buddy calls in and says, hey, punch me in, and their finger's not with whoever's trying to punch them in, this is not going to work. And so there are physical measures of preventing time theft, for example. And in the example that I gave of the business where they had employees with just tons of vacation time that was spent, what they actually ultimately ended up doing to solve that is they installed badge readers on the doors. So to get into work, they had to put their proximity badge up next to the badge reader, and it would open the door that let them into the building. Well, what happened on the back end then is they had a server that collected all that data and shot that file over to the workforce time and attendance, the back end, on a table. And then the calculation was automatically made that said, you know what, you're an employee who's salaried and you don't normally have to punch in, but we've got no record of you even entering the building on this day. And so it would trigger an alert to say, hey, go ask this employee were they on vacation, and then they could update the timesheet. So this is called exception time recording, to actually put their time on their vacation day on the timesheet. And since they've done that, this company has saved so much money. I mean, I don't have an exact figure, but I talked to them after their implementation, and they told me that their liability accounts have come way down just for that one simple change alone. There was cost involved with setting it up front. So you got to understand the costs and understand what the benefits are in return. And we'll look at some of that in a little bit as well. But that is one way through technology then that we can improve your situation and remove pain points, make you more efficient, and tune you up. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Virginia, and she's going to take us through some of the other items and that we've talked about from terms of pain point, and going through and showing you some of the things that a current system on a SaaS model, a software as a service model, can run and solve some of those pain points for you. So Virginia, go ahead.
Thank you, Tom. This will be just a quick drive-by of some of the specifics of where our solution actually meets some of the pain points that you just described. You know, we looked at the clock terminals. We do have the biometrics and badge readers to prevent buddy punching, but also we have different ways of collecting data. We can collect data through mobile, smart devices. We have what's called a web clock. We also have an online timesheet. So for those employees that are maybe salaried and we only want to track their exception, it's not a one-size-fits-all. And so we can help you determine like what's the best mix of that data collection. What we're looking at here is a home page. It's role-based security. So the starting point for most employees is going to look the same, but however, their role in the organization is going to determine the rights that they have within the organization. Just quickly, I wanted to highlight, you know, in solving these pain points, there's a lot of different ways that we can address that. But one is around cost, seems to be the big area that Tom hit earlier. And so the solution is very easy to use, does not require a ton of training, very intuitive, but also the highly automated solution. So we're automating things like labor distribution fields, so we can track not only time in, but how that time is spent. So what we're looking at right here is an example of a web clock. Notice when the employee punches in, they can track their time. We do have a flexible rules engine, which means that there's a lot of configuration that we can do. So your organization may not care so much about department and activity. However, they may care about a project or a task. And so this really helps you look at the cost of not just the employee's labor, but then how was that time spent. We can track in and out. We also can track meal breaks. There are certain places where there are meal break restrictions, meaning an employee needs to take 30 minutes or an hour break before they clock back in. We can provide that as well. And notice this transfer button. So if we need to track an employee, maybe has multiple, maybe they work multiple jobs throughout the day, they can track that as well. Additionally, we offer self-service for employees and managers. Self-service empowers your employees to gain access to information that's important to them. This is both a benefit to the employee, but also to HR and payroll. You don't have an employee calling to find out if they have time available in a accrual bank. They can see that right here. from their home screen. They also have the ability to see their timesheet. They can see how much time they worked. They can see, in this example, this employee was late on Friday. If I look at that exception message, I can see that we have the punctuality exception flag there. Also in self-service, an employee can see their schedule, so however far out in the future you post the schedule, and however far back in the past, they can look at past periods. They also can see what's available in their leave balances. One of the benefits of our solution is it is a real-time solution. We use the solution internally, so if I wanted to see how much time I have available in a specific PTO bank, I could see that. But with this date picker, we actually can pick a future date. So if I wanted to see how much time I would have in the future, I can see that as well. So it's the best of both worlds. You can see current, what's available, in real time currently, but we also can predict and look ahead in the future. And then finally, the results tab. This just shows that we can do the heavy lifting for that gross pay calculation. It also highlights the automation. Notice that the company holiday is automatically put onto the employee's timesheet. Also, we can see that the solution tracked overtime, another automation. Also compliance, having the labor laws, the state and federal labor laws, as well as the leave regulations actually built in. I'm actually going to go ahead and move now into a manager's view because I just want to show a little bit of manager functionality, and I know that we just have a couple moments left for this. So similarly to an employee, a manager is going to have self-service. So, if they need to track exception time, they can do that as well. But managers also have the ability to approve time for employees. They can edit time for groups if there's ever a reason that a manager would need to, punch everybody out instead of having them punch out. Or if there's training, we can do a group edit. Also, here I'm going to just go ahead and take us straight to approving time off. And so a manager can go straight to an employee's timesheet. If there's any correction that needs to be made, perhaps an employee did not clock in or clock out, I can go right to that employee's timesheet. The manager can make the change. And then notice when I go back to that employee's timesheet, this exception message, usually I didn't have time to explain. We use colors to explain the severity. But if something is red, I think of a stop sign. We want to make sure that we send correct information onto payroll. So very easily, I can approve these. If for some reason I would want to reject the timesheet, I could actually kick that back to the employee. One of the benefits of our flexible rules engine is that that you can actually configure your rules, and we want to reflect your policy. So if your policy is that if there's an issue with the timesheet, you kick it back to the employee, you can do that, or a manager can make the correction. Again, you can do that according to your policies. But very easily here, I can simply save these timesheets, and then those are actually ready to go on to payroll. Also from the manager's home screen, we can look at if there's any time off requests or handle any exception messages. And then finally, the last thing that I wanted to show you was just around our leave management. Now, we don't have a lot of time together today, so I can't go into everything, but I do just want to share that we have an entire module that's devoted to leave management. One of our secret sauces, if you will, is that the compliance is actually inherent within the solution. What that means is we have more than 300 state and federal leave regulations, and we have all the documents that are associated with leave. They're actually pre-configured in the solution. We provide, for those HR case managers that manage leave, we provide workflows. We have due dates associated with all the tasks that are required around leave. And there's also self-service, where an employee can actually go in and answer questions with the information that we know about the employee. Based on the information they provide, we can make a determination. Is that FMLA? Is it military leave or some other type of leave? And finally, the other powerful aspect of leave is the integration of leave with time. When an employee is on time, we can automate their timesheet to ensure that they're paid properly during the leave. We also can deduct, with leave, the paid and unpaid leave concurrently. Again, this was a really fast drive-by. I just wanted to highlight that our highly automated solution with the flexible rules engine does have the power to address the specific pain points that we spoke about earlier. And with that, Tom, I'm going to pass it back over to you.
Thank you very much. So, while I get my screen shared back over here, thank you for that. And yes, this is an example of one of the best in breed softwares that's on the market today. And so when you're looking for something to meet your solutions, or to make the solutions for your pain points, then looking at something like Workforce software, where you can handle not just one or two complex rules in a vacuum, but that those rules can all play off of each other. I think that was a very important thing that she said, that as complex as it gets, something like this can be made to work it. But also there are, with all that, there's a lot of complexity that has already been completed by best practice, right? So if you can meet those best practices, it may be that as we drive into this next section here for a moment, that your implementation costs of something like this can be lowered as well. So Virginia, thank you very much for that. So yeah, when we have a list of things that we have found to be, this is what we want to target, these are the things that are causing us pain, here's the type of money, or the type of time, or the type of risk, right? The type of the standardizations that we want to address, then that's all good and well, that those have been identified, but until it moves to action, then those are just, you know, they're never going to impact your business. So, so we're going to look for just a moment here at a high-level thought process to how to get things done in an organization. And so this works at all levels, but the higher up you are in your organization, of course, the less friction you're going to have in general to getting your organization moving to action. It is very difficult to move a rock that's sitting still, but once you find that you've got a little bit of steam behind it, then you'll find that the path gets easier as you go along. So the first thing that you want to do is, it's important not to be a silo when you're doing this, right? You don't want to be a partnership of one. You've identified some areas that you feel the pain in, and you want to build a coalition of people who are like-minded and agree that we can improve the business by solving these. We can improve what we're delivering to our customer. We can improve the costs of the business, the employee satisfaction, and all those points that we talked about. So build a partnership. Look around with who it is that you can bring on board. Don't forget IT, right? They may not be involved in the partnership early, the earliest days when you're still looking at pain points, but at a fairly early stage, you want to engage them as well, in particular if it's because you've got old software. The next thing that you want to do is your homework, right? And so you've talked about the pain points, and that's one step in the right direction. But you need to understand, what is it costing you in terms of wages, overtime, fines, right? Paying more than what an employee is due, or the costs of the labor, right, to do the hours required to investigate or to operate under the current processes, right? That there's a time cost involved with that as well, and what's slipping because you're having to do whatever it is that is inefficient. Look at the data, right? Is there a cost that you can quantify at not having the right data, or the compliance costs, right? What is it costing to comply with the laws currently, or the cost of being out of compliance and the audits, etc. Right? There's a lot of things to consider, and what you want to do is you want to build kind of the whole business case for why it is that there should be a change. And you're going to need to make that case for change to somebody at a high enough level that they can approve further investigation and further research, right? Because this initiative is actually starting an additional expense to the company, as an expense to say the status quo of what we're doing right now is not acceptable anymore. We can do better than this. but that generally costs money. It has change cost. Even if you find a solution that doesn't involve buying something, you still have a change cost in terms of labor to implement changes of processes and things that people are very attached to the current process, even if they're not the best. It's easiest to just not fight it because we're all comfortable with it, right? And comfort can be the enemy of change. So make the case for change to someone who is authorized to make that decision. And if you're the one who's authorized to make that decision, then you need whoever it is that is coming to you with the information to be able to give you enough information, have done their homework enough to be able to say, yes, this looks like a worthwhile effort to continue the investigation. And so at that point, you're adding to your partnership, your coalition, right? You're adding your executive sponsor probably at that time, possibly also your IT person as you go forward, and you're going to go find your solution, right? So you understand the costs of what the status quo is. You want to look at what is the best for both today and tomorrow. You want to understand, the solution costs. So you already understand what your living like it is costs, but you want to understand what's the solution cost to the product, right? Is it a one-time fee? Is it a recurring fee? SaaS models, for example, the hosted in the cloud type models, you get the updates, you get the maintenance, but it's also an annual fee. So you need to understand what that is. You need to understand how much it's going to cost in terms of infrastructure. If you're going to want to add the time clocks with the biometrics, right? What are the costs to that? And you're going to need to understand your own capabilities or limitations in terms of implementation. Just because you have an IT department doesn't mean that you are correctly positioned to do an update of this kind. It might be best if you bring in outside consulting. That's something that HR Strategies Consulting that we do, is that we partner with organizations to understand their business and help do the homework of saying, okay, where are the pain points and what now can we do? What are some common sense solutions, some best practice solutions to go find the best of breed products or to find the best types of solutions to whatever it is that your pain points are that you're looking to solve. And so you may be increasing your partnership with a consultant at that point. And so that's why you need to have the executive buy-in at that point, because that does represent a cost to implement. And then once you understand the cost, one of the biggest things that you're going to need to understand when does the cost of the solution become repaid by the savings when you compare it to the cost of continuing with no changes. So if we continued for the next 2 years, the next 3 years, the next 5 years, here's how much it's going to cost us to do that, just like we are. If we pivot and we make this change, yes, we have this upfront cost for the change, but here's what we gain, and here is the impact to the business that's expected. And so when you have all of that information ready, you're going to make a presentation to the decision makers, or if you're the decision maker, you're going to have that presentation made to you. And it may be one, it may be multiple people, right? It's usually more than one person. And a decision is going to be made. And with the decision to proceed, then the next step is to implement. And that's a whole nother webinar. And so with that, I trust that you found this to be of value to you. HR Strategies Consulting, this is what we do. We help you to identify the needs within your business. We are very well versed at understanding pain points and how they affect the business, and also pairing solutions to meet those. And so if you are wanting to reach out to HRC, if this is a journey that you're on and you want to engage HRC, spend a little more time with us, understand some assistance that we can provide. Here's someone who's not on the call today, but she is available to you, Terry Justin, and anybody with our sales department. The information is here on the screen. It'll be on the slides that we send out also as well. And also you can go to our website, HR Strategies Consulting. The workforce software site, workforcesoftware.com. We are a partner with Workforce Software, but you can get more information on the software there. But also we are happy to do a demo with you and to work with you to help you on your journey to create a more efficient HR and payroll. We are also an SAP partner. And so that's there's some best-in-class solutions there, in particular with Employee Central, that we can also assist with. So with that, I wanted to thank you for coming today, and join us for our next webinar. Look back on the same site that you signed up to this one for. on the hrstrategies.com. You can click on the resources button and you'll find the webinars tab there. This is where this will be posted for your review later. And so we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you much. Bye-bye.